Is there a place for a cassette deck older than me to play a role in music production and my music? Well, yes. And I want to share this dusty treasure that is the TASCAM Porta One Ministudio, an iconic 4-track cassette recorder from the 80s made by parent company TAC, and I am in love with it. Now, yeah, cassette tapes 2023, they're not common, but they can still be gold, definitely depending on the genre. And I think precisely because it's not common, a really, really easy way to get a bit of characteristic sound into your music. It brings that analog magic that I just don't think you can get with a lot of plugins. At least as far as I know, there isn't even a specific plugin for this machine. So I'm going to break down why I still use this in my workflow, how you can use it for those gritty lo-fi sounds or that hands-on interaction with analog EQ, or for that real tape compression and distortion sound in your mixes. So if you're looking for something that fits into your lo-fi genre, or, something to glue together and add that beautiful retro saturation to your high-end mix, or just want to gawk at some cool old school gear, then stick around. To demonstrate the impact the Porta Studio can have on the overall sound of the track, I've decided to use one of my own as an example. And since I'm using a full mix, this is going to be similar to how I might use the Porta Studio for mastering, like to replace a saturation or a compression stage, or as a pre-mastering stage before going into mastering, but after the mix is complete. There are two main effects I like to try and achieve with this vintage gear. First is the analog EQ shaping and box tone that you get from the electronics inside of the device, but bypassing the tape recording, the tape itself. And the second is the distortion and compression added by recording and re-listening to the cassette tape itself, the tape distortion. And just for those that have this piece of gear and are trying to follow along with what I'm saying, to get the first effect, the analog EQ and the box tone, I tend to send a left and a right channel, hard panned, out from the track or sound inside of my DAW into the 1/4-inch jack inputs for the Porta Studio, and then I pan them opposite on the Porta Studio itself. You have to set the input mode on the Porta Studio to mic line. In Ableton, I've set up a stereo input from the RCA outputs of the Porta Studio. This lets me monitor the sound in real time as I tweak the EQ and then record directly into Ableton to capture the impact of the analog processing. This is how that sounds. To also get the tape distortion, I record the track onto a cassette by toggling record and pressing play on the Porta Studio, and after rewinding, I switch the inputs on the channels to tape mode, hit play, and monitor the output. This adds the unique compression, saturation, and tape noise that you would expect. Now, there is another feature that I didn't mention, and that's called pitch control, which is really just another name for tape speed. And for this demonstration, I've recorded at the lowest, the middle, and the highest tape speed. And what we would expect to find with this is that the highest tape speed results in the highest quality playback. The reason being, the faster the tape speed, the more tape you use for the same recording, you're effectively increasing your bandwidth. And so, a note on recording at different tape speeds. On the screen now, going from left to right, I have some meter information from the slowest tape speed through to the fastest tape speed. And while there's not a significant difference, this does show that the compression from the tape is a real thing as we increase the tape speed. We can see that on the fastest tape speed, we actually do have a slightly higher LUFS reading of -14 compared to -15. And we can see for each increase in speed that we do get a higher momentary reading as well, showing that the faster tape increases the volume and compresses our signal a little bit more. It's also worth pointing out that there really is a quality difference between recording on high tape speed and low tape speed. This graph here is showing the average frequency response averaged over the entire duration of the track. This is on the lowest speed tape and the highest speed tape. And as you can see, we dip out of the ideal region, at least according to Tonal Balance 2, we dip out of the ideal region on the slow tape speed just before the 10 kilohertz area, and we dip below it just after the 10 kilohertz region on the high tape speed, showing that we really do have a greater range in our frequency response. When recording with a vintage Porta Studio, it might be obvious, but of course you're going to need cassette tapes on hand, and well, they're not mass produced today, but you can still find them. You can get brands like TDK and Maxwell from Amazon, but there are also specialty retailers that you can usually find around your region that will still produce tape that you can order from. Now, when you look for tape, you're going to notice that there are two main types that you'll keep seeing, type 1 or type I, or type 2, type II. Now, type 1 tape is usually brown and has a more limited frequency response. Basically, the higher frequencies when you record onto type 1 are going to get rolled off. It's going to get difficult to reproduce and replay those frequencies. So that gives you a darker, more distorted, lo-fi sound. The type 2 tapes, they tend to be darker or black completely, and they reproduce the full frequency spectrum much more faithfully. The main difference, though, is that type 1 is going to impart that lo-fi feel onto your recording, whereas the type 2 is going to retain most of the sonic detail, especially in that high end, and provide you with just the tape compression and saturation on your mix, keeping its original qualities. So one more of the really cool features that you can pull off with this is Varispeed recording, and that is basically recording your track at a high tape speed and playing it back at a low one in order to pitch down the audio of your track, or you can do it the other way, record low tape speed and play back high for a pitch up in the audio. It's like having an analog version of repitching, something you might be very familiar with in your DAW. So here's me showing that now. So if you want to get a more extreme tape distortion and overload, then you can just push the levels further into red on the VU meter while recording. So here's an example where I'm going to record hot into the Porta Studio, and I'm going to keep increasing the gain, making the recording hotter and hotter, so you can hear the characteristic of this machine as I continue to push it more into the overdriven region. Alright, well, that's as much energy as I have for this video. That took a lot of time and effort to edit and put together, but I enjoyed it. And if you enjoyed it too, then please let me know. Like, subscribe, and if I know you enjoy it, then I'll keep trying to make more. Alright, cheers.